Well, welcome back from our break. It's back to Julia Graham, CEO from Airmic, and I have pleasure in hosting the last two sessions this afternoon, starting with a really great discussion, which is going to take place by two experts in the whole subject of people. And the discussion is going to be called Workplace Transformation, Threats and, of course, Opportunities. And this fireside discussion will take views on the latest thinking about what's happening in the midst of the pandemic, especially now that the vaccine rollout is underway, and what we might expect much longer term to emerge over the next decade, if we can bear to think that far ahead. We will consider co-working and flexible space, safety and wellness, and the changes, challenges and opportunities in the workplace of the future, and given our theme for today and the role that technology might play. So I'd like to introduce our two participants today who are going to have that fireside discussion. The first is Darren Cornish, People Services Director in the People function at Aviva. Darren's been at Aviva for 19 years, though after the first 16 he left the business and spent 9 years leading the UK sales and service operation for E.ON Energy Business, and then all things marketing and customer for a retail stockbroker. He returned to Aviva at the end of 2017 and adores the purpose of the company, a great expression. And he's to be here today for customers to help them have a better tomorrow, and says he had unfinished business in helping Aviva become the customer leader in the UK FS. An expert in a strategic method of change called systems thinking, challenging conventional leadership thinking and therefore ways of working to deliver what really matters for customers. At the start of 2020, Darren, perfect timing with the pandemic on the horizon, he moved into HR for the first time in a 28-year career to lead the transformation of Aviva's people services and play a part in helping Aviva perform even better through its people. Welcome, Darren. I'd then like to welcome Wilson Wong, who is Head of Insight and Future and Interim Head of Research at the People Institute, CIPD. Wilson leads the Institute Research, Futures and Foresight capability. He's been involved in futures research since 2000. He's a visiting professor at Nottingham Business School. He's co-editor of Human Capital Management Standards, a complete guide, and he represents the UK on human capital metrics at International Standards TC 260, which is the HR standards, and is an independent chair of the Human Capital Standards Committee and deputy chair of the Knowledge Management Standards Committee at the British Standards Institution, BSI. His research interests include the psychological contract, fairness and human capital development and measurement. His career has spanned academia, corporate finance, and national ICT development policy. Wilson, welcome this afternoon. Now, before we get too much further, Wilson, I think you're going to preface a question and then ask a poll.
Thanks, Julia. So I'm going to just start with a little bit of research on the audience today. It's a thought experiment that a friend of mine, Tom Pasmeans, has shared with his students forever. So the poll is based on a scenario. Imagine that your plane makes an emergency landing and breaks into 3 parts. The cabin fills with smoke. You realize that everyone has to get out. Now, I want to know whether you think we live on planet A, where the passengers turn to their neighbors to check that they're all right, those needing assistance get help, and the people are willing to give their lives even for perfect strangers. Or we live on planet B, where everyone fends for themselves, panic breaks out, there's pushing and shoving, and children, the elderly, and people with disabilities get trampled. So the poll should be up on your screen. So decide whether we are on planet A or planet B, and then I'll share with you at the end, towards the end of the session, what the results are.
Darren, I hope you've pushed A or B. I can see you smiling at the questions.
Well, Julia and Wilson, great question. I'm from HR now, so clearly it has to be Planet B, where everyone fends for themselves. In HR, we're wolves in sheep's clothing, aren't we? But no, one of our values at Aviva is care, and I wouldn't last long at Aviva if I was heading towards Planet B. It's Planet A all round. Yeah, for me.
You definitely would not. So while people have cast their poll, Bruce, are we finished with the poll? Yep, brilliant. So we're going to come back to that. If we can sort of hide those results for now, we're going to talk about them and return to them in a moment. So we've got people posing, and what I'm going to do, I've got to know Darren and Wilson quite well over the past few weeks, and they really do not need me acting, as I said to them earlier, somebody who stands between those playing table tennis who are trying to hit the ball over the net, and I come in and helpfully catch the ball. So I'm going to open with a question, and we're going to see, they've done a lot of background preparation, but I'm going to see how they bat the ball across the net to each other, and I will step in if I think we need a bit of umpiring, okay? So Wilson, I'm going to open with this. Would you like to start that game with immediate risks and reactions that you've seen in the people space to COVID-19?
Thanks, Julia. Okay, so I mean, this session is really about the people, so I'm going to focus on that particular aspect, and I think the immediate risks or concerns would be the safety of the workforce. So if you can imagine a year ago when organizations were suddenly asked to shut down, and organizations then had to find a way of maintaining business as usual with their dispersed workforce. One of the key things that came up was that a lot of organizations didn't have data on their workforce. They didn't know if there were any undisclosed issues that made it impossible or difficult for them to work in a dispersed way. So the safety of the workforce was the first thing. And of course, there was the maintenance of security. What was the psychological contract with the employees, given that there was a possibility of furlough, there was a possibility of being made redundant? All those things had to be addressed very quickly at the outset in order to maintain some level of assurance and security for the workforce. So those were the kind of immediate things the organizations had to work with very quickly. And as part of that journey, as Julia said, I have a role with the BSI. We set out within weeks to develop a national standard of safe working under pandemic conditions, and that has now become an ISO document called ISO 45005, which gives you a very comprehensive checklist of considerations for the occupational health and safety of your workforce. It's been developed by over 50 countries, so if you work in different jurisdictions, it's probably a very useful way of referencing the kinds of procedures you put into your organization. So those are my kind of initial thoughts about what was concerning for organizations. And I wonder whether, Darren, you had anything to add to that.
Yeah. I mean, having lived, I joined HR and the people function in the January of last year, and so within a matter of weeks, this became the single area of focus. And we made the decision at Group Exco that as we could see that the initial lockdown and work from home was about to be announced, that we would confirm to all our people what we call Government Plus. So everything the government was saying was required from a health and safety perspective in terms of how organisations should be managing through this scenario and through with their people. We said we'd do that and some. So, and we just wanted to take away anxiety and fear, I guess, right from the start. So we confirmed to our people in early March last year that we would not be furloughing a single Aviva colleague. We confirmed to our people that if they were required to homeschool, then we would retain them on fully contracted pay, even if they couldn't complete those contracted hours. And we also tried to look out to the community as well and do things such as we said with 17,000 colleagues in the UK, if any of those colleagues had previous frontline NHS experience and felt comfortable to go back and contribute to clearly what was a global and national crisis, then they would remain on full pay with Aviva, and we would support them doing that. So those kind of I guess principles were right there from the outset. But you know, it has been challenging, and in fact, I think we're only at the end of the beginning now, Wilson. I think you know there is a sense of anxiety regardless of the vaccine. I think in terms of just safety and security for people coming out of hopefully in the UK out of the worst of the pandemic, and potentially moving into hybrid smart working ways of operating, and just what they're going to find as the UK returns to a little bit of normality. And we're working really hard to try to test our way forward on what we could see as the possible risks that may well still manifest themselves, and they get much broader now, Wilson. So things like diversity and inclusion. We've said to all our colleagues that we foresee a smart working business whereby colleagues and teams will adapt their working patterns between office and home, and not just where they work, but also how and when they work. But we need to be really conscious of what that means for instance, from a gender perspective. You know, will female colleagues feel more obligated to be at home so that they can also support some of the caring and home duties? And as a result of which, over time, we not see the same progression in terms of gender pay and gender progression. So there's consequences from how we manage the next year or so that could take much longer to manifest, but be very difficult if they do manifest to manage our way back from. So we're just trying to make sure we're thinking as far ahead as possible, Wilson.
I think one of the things that we were concerned about was the nature of kind of voice and representation, because during a pandemic, for a lot of organizations with frontline staff, the people who were best able to judge the safety of some of the procedures that they had to carry out were those frontline staff. And when you don't have, I suppose, the assumption of a central physical clearinghouse of that knowledge, how then do you maintain that flow of voice and intelligence so that you can modify the operations to both ensure business as usual, as sort of usual, as well as thinking through the safety of those frontline workers? And your thought about diversity and inclusion in organizations, there was a question mark about some of the workforce that had been onboarded during the pandemic, the lockdown periods, and the visibility of those people in the business. And of course, that impacts the opportunity, progression, access to corporate information, even socialization to norms about how information is shared. So were there interesting experiments going on in Aviva about maintaining the flow of voice, even from those people just joining the organization?
We've done, Wilson, great points, and we've never done as much colleague listening as we've done in the last 14, 15 months, continual surveying with really high levels of engagement, because people want their voice heard. They want to express their views and opinions, preferences, concerns, etc. But also one of the in retrospect master strokes that we had at the outset was we asked all our leaders, as we moved into a video virtual environment from home, all our leaders to significantly increase the frequency of their team-based communications, both with their whole team, but also on a weekly one-to-one basis with each colleague, and having that continual flow of how people were adapting, feeling. But on a broader perspective, Aviva Risk Solutions have just done a back-to-work survey, and what surfaced from there, I think it was nearly 25% of those surveyed, a couple of thousand people, said that in the period of the last 14 months, the work, how their company does their work, has in itself changed. And in fact, 60% said that they've seen no sign yet of how they'll connect to refresher training and be brought back up to speed. And, whilst Aviva, we have an intangible product, we sell a promise that your claim will be looked after or your investment will mature. But all the same, what we've seen is a significant shift in how customers want to do business. Yeah, very digital, very online. Our traffic to our self-service and digital services has significantly increased, and that means we need to adapt and change what it is we're asking of our people day to day, both now and as we go forward. And that creates uncertainty and a degree of anxiety, particularly when you can't get in a room together and workshop this stuff through collaboratively. We're adopting a philosophy of experimentation. So we, unlike some organisations that we see that are saying, either it will be everyone back to an office, everyone working at home, or even a 60-40 ratio, we're saying actually for leaders, take a look at what's right for colleagues, for customers and the business, and begin to experiment as we are allowed to do some degree of return to office. And obviously from the end of June, hopefully that will be open to all. And just see how you can make best use of whichever dynamic you're operating out of. So because what we don't want to do is rush ahead and lock down too quickly on a designed way of working that may have some consequences that are not immediately obvious.
Okay, I think what you're also alluding to is this move towards what people would consider what hybrid working now, and this it is going to be a term. It's probably going to be the management term this year.
Yeah, so, I think it's the buzzword.
And we did a kind of poll of the workforce, a general workforce representative poll, and 4 out of 10 respondents expressed some kind of concern about moving back into the workplace after such a prolonged period of lockdown. And within our organization, we had over 90% say they want to come back. I think the danger is that they are wanting to come back to a world that no longer exists, or an office that no longer exists the way that they remember. And how do you manage that transition? So we have a kind of flow chart where we ask certain questions about hybrid working. Is the role suitable for hybrid working? And if not, what do you do about it?
Perfect.
And then after that, what are the risks and impacts? So who does it impact? What other stakeholders are impacted? What kind of additional resources do you need to make this work, if at all? So lots of questions to ask. It's not just a kind of, you don't have to commute for 3 days a week. It's a very complex dynamic of managing people who have very, very dispersed needs now. And from my perspective, looking at the psychological contract, work becomes very different because you are now not 5 days in the office and 2 days off. You are 2 days in the office and 5 days off. So your relationship with the work site, the workplace, is very, very different. So I wondered if there was stuff that you were doing at Aviva to kind of explore this notion of hybrid working and how you're framing it for your workforce.
I absolutely, Wilson. What I love about this is this is a genuine opportunity. The phrase "don't let a crisis go to waste." It's a genuine opportunity to rethink how work gets done to the benefit of all stakeholders, including employees and colleagues. And we've used the term smart working as opposed to hybrid working, in that we are trying to open up that thinking and those mental models broader than just simply the where, the home or the office, to say, actually, the nature of work is also changing. The nature of your psychological contract with the organisation will look a bit different, because you'll have less of that office experience where there's a very designed way of communicating and engaging and involving you. So actually, let's step back and look at not just the where, but the when, the how. And we've seen some real opportunities. We run large contact centres in several cities around the country. And for instance, before, when all colleagues were being asked to be at the office for their shift, we found it very difficult to manage our resource, our number of people, against where there's spikes in demand from customers. Customers tend to phone most intensively between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. in the afternoon. Well, actually, what that suits perfectly is some individuals who, for instance, have children at home and would prefer to just do that 3-hour pattern, then come back later in the day. Because they're at home, they don't need to worry about the cost and the time of travel, and they can be much more adaptive and flexible to the pattern. It just strikes me, 2 years ago, there was, without a shadow of doubt, a bit of a mindset amongst in Aviva around, work from home. Is it genuinely feasible to be as productive if you can't visibly and physically see your team delivering their outputs in front of you? And this period has absolutely shown that held no truth. And if anything, our bigger concern is what we call hyperproductivity, a strain that and a burnout that can be risked by the fact that people say, well, yeah, I'm at home anyway, so my working day can just extend, and I can do a few more calls, and I can clear down all my emails, and before you know it, you really are pushing yourself to the limit. So ironically, a lack of productivity has been very much not the problem. It's been the opposite that we're alive to.
Yes, this kind of cyber presenteeism, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's very tempting, because the boundaries of work and non-work is far less clear. So what else are you doing on the kind of well-being stuff? Because if you look at the statistics, certainly mental health is rising up the agenda, because you can find that not everybody is coping, and some people who are coping better than others when you assume that they're not. There are a lot of assumptions about people's resilience that is being tested at this time. And how do you monitor from a distance?
Yeah. Our overall absence, Wilson, across those 16,500 colleagues is down by 40% since compared to the average of the previous 2 years pre-pandemic. But the category, the only category within absence that has increased for us is mental health absence. So you're absolutely right. As organisations, we need to find ways to do everything we can to support colleagues through what is a very stressful and challenging situation, not just with work, but with all that's been happening for them, their families, and their friends. So we have a very comprehensive wellbeing programme. And to your point, Wilson, what is fundamental in this is having good analytics. So we have a suite of people metrics that we are continuously looking at to identify where we might be seeing particular hotspots, particular clusters, what's different in that work environment. And one of the things we tend to find is if people are feeling pressured in their broader life, and then they don't have mastery, they don't have autonomy, don't have purpose in their work, then that combine those two, and you end up, unfortunately, in a very difficult space, often with mental health. So working really closely with the data and the analytics to understand where those particular challenges may be, and getting alongside the leaders and ensuring all our wellbeing programme and support is being brought as best to life for all colleagues.
Great. And you mentioned autonomy, and actually that we found was quite an important ingredient in managing the relationship with your staff going, in this kind of remote, dispersed way. And one of the things that at CIPD we did was we suspended kind of performance appraisals for a whole year, because we found that given that we were asking the workforce to adapt the ways of working, change the scope of their work considerably to respond to the customer, what we did was we did quarterly assessments of deliverables. So more transactional, much more control for the individual, so that they can actually see for themselves what they're able to take off, what they're able to deliver, and narrow the assessment scope so that it became fairer. Everybody could see the transparent transactional work, and then give the workforce enough time to adapt and socialize during quite a strange period. So I wondered if there was anything going on in performance management at Aviva.
Yeah, we haven't moved away from the annual and mid-year performance cycle, but absolutely to your point, and referencing back to my comment earlier about the frequency of those leader-colleague conversations, and absolutely, we have provided a whole set of support and training for our leaders to move much more into a dynamic conversation that is much more agile, and be less concerned about thinking that a goal or an objective that was set in January last year is still going to be relevant at the end of December, because so much is changing around the teams and around the work they do. So constantly iterating, constantly experimenting, and culturally, absolutely trusting in that autonomy and the skill of the colleague to find their way to the best achievement of their outcomes. It's I think the hardest task amongst our colleague base over the last year or so has been for our frontline and our core leaders, more junior leaders that have had to move into such a different leadership domain. And they've had to do that themselves, dealing with all that's happening around them and working from home. We have a phrase that you can't pour from an empty cup. And so we're desperately trying to invest in our leaders so they feel that they are then they're then capable of and set up for success in carrying their teams forward. Because
I'm going to step in there, because I haven't had to sort of step in between the two people playing.
We could go on forever.
But I'm quite right. You should be allowed to, because it's a really, really great dialogue between the two of you. Thank you. But I do just want to take the last couple of minutes to come back to that very cheeky poll that Wilson put up at the beginning. And I wonder if we could put those results back up again and just see what people said. Which button would they press? Now, Wilson and Darren, and I'll start with Wilson. Are you surprised by that, or is that what you expected?
Okay, thanks.
Just remind people what Planet B and Planet A were.
Okay, so Planet A was the I suppose the more altruistic planet, where the passengers helped each other to evacuate in an orderly fashion, and Planet B was the one where they basically panicked and trampled over each other. And all it's each person for themselves, survival of the fittest. And I am a little bit surprised, because if you look at the literature around this, most people assume that that Planet B is far and away the dominant. And usually in a thought experiment like this, you would have about nearly 90% of the people saying we live in Planet B. And it's not an accident, because it's based on something called veneer theory, and that civilization is only that thin. And if you look at a lot of the theory, like economic theory, individual interests and so on, embedded within a lot of the theories that we use is an assumption that we live in Planet B. And in managing risk and other factors, if you just think about a year ago when the government said no way could we lock down the country because there would be chaos, nobody would follow it. And that is a reflection of the dominance way of thinking about society, even though if you look at the empirical evidence of what happens during crises, people are far more altruistic. You look at the 9/11 literature, people were helping people down the stairs. They were helping people that weren't even in their own firm to go down to escape the smoke. So well done. I'm hoping that you will use this result to actually challenge yourself when you make decisions and policies about your people.
And Darren, final comment by you.
Well, I'm just pleased there's clearly an audience of risk professionals, but also of HR professionals. given the I feel very comforted.
Well, look, I think we end on that point. I think that's a great place to end. Look, thank you so much. I felt like I was eavesdropping on a private conversation between the two of you. Very candid, very interesting. Love the way that you were bouncing the subjects backwards and forwards to each other, and a super session. So, Darren and Wilson, thank you so much for being with us today. And we really appreciated your conversation and allowing you to listen in on that private chat. Okay, and thank you very much indeed. And please take care.
Thanks, Julia.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wilson.
Well, thank you, Darren. Thank you, Julia.